Hal, welcome to the World Class Dads podcast, brother. Glad to have you here.
Dude, it's an honor. This is one of my favorite topics that I don't get to talk about on too many podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a chance to talk business a few times and talk about your entrepreneurial journey. So I can link people back to those old episodes we did on the Millennial Mastermind. But today I really want to focus on this topic of fatherhood, which is obviously near and dear to my heart, and I know it is to yours too. So just to give the audience a little bit of background, how many kids do you have and what are their ages?
So I've id two kids. The oldest, my daughter, is just turned 11, and my son just turned 7.
Awesome. So what did your world, your life look like at the time your 11-year-old came to be? What was kind of going on, just from a life perspective, from a professional perspective, what was going on in your realm?
Yeah, it was 2009. So I had to kind of bounce back. 2008, I hit like my lowest point business-wise, where when the economy crashed, I kind of crashed with it and lost over half of my clients. I was coaching entrepreneurs at the time and salespeople. And then in 2008, I created this thing called the Miracle Morning, which we've talked about on the other podcast. And that turned my life around in a matter of months. In fact, that's why I called my morning ritual the Miracle Morning, because I told my wife it felt like a miracle how it had changed my life. And she goes, "It's your miracle morning." I go, "Yeah, I like that. It's miracle morning," but it was never a book idea or anything. It was just my kind of own personal morning ritual. And then, so in 2009, I had really turned things around. I had gotten not all my clients back, the same ones, but I had, my client load was the best it had ever been. I had started speaking at colleges around the country. And I was writing the Miracle Morning book. Mm-hmm. And so when she was born, I was really in a great place professionally. The college speaking had really taken off. So I was, 2 or 3 times a month, I'd be at some college around the country, giving the speech, talking about the Miracle Morning, working on the book at home. And then, and then when I was home, of course, my wife was still going to school. So I would take care of our daughter during the day and, feed her and give her naps and, all of that stuff. And then rock her to bed at night. I remember I used to bounce her on this ball, and I'd count to 1,000 bounces. And then I'd finally give up and be like, all right, if you're not asleep by 1,000 bounces, I give up. So,
yeah, well, obviously you're a high achiever. You're riding that wave of momentum going into that. And baby kind of throws a wrench into the system in terms of the time you have to dedicate towards building a business, like just focusing on that professional side. So how did that impact what was your mindset then, making that transition from having really your full focus being on your business and your relationship with your wife, but then adding, this little child who needs so much time just to keep alive, but also to love and it's fun, but other things get offset. So what was your mindset during that time frame? Do you recall?
Yeah, I think my mindset, part of it was that my wife was amazing. She was extremely supportive. In fact, we got into a ritual where she would stay up with our daughter and let me sleep in a separate room. It's because I was doing the Miracle Morning. Like, it was such a relatively new thing. And for me, it was like so important that this is, I saw it as my life's work and the impact that I was going to make on the world. And so my wife and I talked, and I don't remember at what point, how old my daughter was when we had this conversation, but my wife really agreed. She saw on the same page, like that, you need to live the Miracle Morning. And I'm sure I said it, sweetie, I need to live the Miracle Morning if I'm going to, like, this is what's going to, be our future and set us up, and all of these things. And it's my mission in life. And so it did get to a point where we transitioned, where she would actually, because she stopped going to school, she stopped working. And so then that was kind of the deal, was so she could stay up with the baby and then all night, and then nap during the day with our daughter. Mm-hmm. And then she was really awesome to let me, get a full night's sleep, so that because I had to work during the day. It's really hard to, be at your best for your coaching clients, right? When you didn't sleep throughout the night. So we really struck a really nice balance where my wife would take care of our daughter during the night, and then I would help, throughout the day and on breaks. And for the evening, she was mine to give my wife a break until bedtime and that sort of thing.
Nice. No, I love seeing being in that position as new dad myself. I love hearing kind of what other people's situations and journeys looked like. And
Yeah.
so
Some of my friends, by the way, they're like, your wife lets you, what?
I
She
fall into
lets you.
that camp where I'm like, you lucky bastard. But I say that, but that's because my wife and I both are working full time. So
See, that's a different story. Yeah.
we've got to divide and conquer a little bit. But
Sure.
so obviously personal development's been a big part of your journey.
Yeah.
I mean, the Miracle Morning, I've read it, I practice it, I love the concept, and it's all based around these 6 fundamental elements of personal development. How do you try to work that in and instill that personal development or personal growth aspect with your kids now that they're starting to get a little bit older? You've got the 11-year-old, I'm sure, is starting to come into her own, reaching those teenage years. I'm just curious if that's something that you're trying to instill in them actively, or you're just trying to practice and let them absorb that way.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. My son has taken the Miracle Morning a lot more so than my daughter. So he'll do it with me, or he'll ask me, "Hey, Dad, wake me up tomorrow at 6 and let's do the Miracle Morning."
Oh,
And it
that's
just
awesome.
makes me so happy. And my daughter is kind of like, "Dad, leave me alone," right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that, like my wife's not the morning person; she's the night owl, and so it's kind of like my daughter seems to kind of be more like my wife in that way, and my son's more like me. So we've done it at times where we'll all 3 do it together, me and both kids, or me and my daughter, but it's usually me and my son. So in terms of the Miracle Morning aspect, I think that the biggest way that I'm instilling personal development is really leading by example and through my language.
Mm.
And through my Miracle Morning itself, I have a rule, for example, each of the 6, let me say this, each of the 6 practices that you mentioned that make up the Miracle Morning, which if anybody's not familiar, these are known as the SAVERS being an acronym. Silence, that's your meditation. The A is for affirmations. The V is for visualization. The E is for exercise. The R is for reading. And the final S is for scribing, which is a word for journaling or writing. Those 6 practices, I integrate my family through virtually all of them, at least most of them. So for example, I will meditate, especially on the weekends. I will meditate usually around, I do something that I created, I call it emotional optimization meditation, where I ask myself, what is the ideal emotional state for me to be in today? And that can vary throughout the day. I might need, joy at one point. I might need patience at one point. I might need confidence at one point. But I'll usually go, what's the most important state for me to be in today? And then I'll spend, 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on how long meditation is, just in that state. So I'm hardwiring it into my brain, and into my nervous system. And then I can access it much more easily throughout the day. So on the weekend, it's like today's family day. Every Saturday, every Sunday is pure family day. And so for me, it's really getting myself in that state for my family. And then in terms of affirmations, I have affirmations for my, to be the best father that I can be and be the best husband that I can be. So I'm affirming those things every day for my family. And then I have a rule now, and I encourage anybody to take this on, but where I'm not allowed to read a business book until I've earned that. I've earned it through reading a book on parenting or marriage first thing in the morning. So I have to read a book on parenting or marriage before I can read a business book. And what it does 2 things. Number one, it ensures that I'm growing as a husband and a father, and I'm learning things that I can apply to improve my relationship with my family and my impact with them. And but it's also just in doing it that way, I'm reminding myself every morning that family is my number one priority. Like it's not just lip service. It's not just in my head. It's not just something I kid myself, which in the past I think I've done. But it reminds me that no, family's number one. And that's, I'm showing it right now by I am focusing on being better for them before anything else.
Yeah, no. And you also mentioned one thing in there that I want to touch on too. You said language is a piece of it that is something that you're very conscious of. How's that? Can you go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, it's just, always just regurgitating, motivational phrases and adages and reminding them, you can do anything and teaching them self-help. I'm trying to think of a recent example. Just with limiting belief, whenever my son will say, or daughter will say something that I'm terrible at this, or I'm bad at this, I'm like, no. You are whatever you say you are. Actually, I'll tell you a great example. My daughter, when she was like 4, she's like, Dad, I'm scared to go to bed. She'd seen something scary on TV or something. And I'm scared to go to bed. And I said, sweetie, let me teach you something. I do these things called affirmations, and whatever you say becomes true for you. I said, so if you say I'm scared, then you feel scared. If you say I'm not scared, I'm brave. I'm brave. Then you're brave. I said, so tonight as you're falling asleep, and if you find yourself thinking I'm scared, replace that with I'm brave. I'm courageous. There's nothing to be afraid of. I said, just say it over and over again. I'm brave. I'm courageous. There's nothing to be afraid of. And so I went in there with bed. I laid her down to bed. I go, say it right now, like 5 times. And she goes, I'm brave. I'm courageous. There's nothing to be afraid of. And she went through like 5 times. I go, okay. I go, if you feel scared, just say those things and just feel brave, feel courageous. Right. And the next morning she came downstairs. She goes, Daddy, it worked. It worked. I just did those affirmations and then I fell asleep and I wasn't scared. Yes. It worked. So yeah. So I just try to instill that, throughout the day. And then I have in my daughter's and son's room, I help them create affirmations. They're up on the walls and, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to read a quote of yours actually too. So the language piece leads into it well. And that is, the greatest gift you can give to those you love is to live your life to your full potential, thereby showing them how to do the same. So I love that quote. When I read it, it just struck a chord with me of that kind of living your life by example so that those you love can really look at you and be like, that's how it's done. That's how I want to live my life. So can you go into that a little bit and just share how you've seen that kind of manifest itself in reality or what that means to you?
Yeah. It's interesting, and you'll find this probably as your kids get older. Everybody's different, but I had this idea going in. I consider myself pretty relatively personally developed, if you will, right? I try to always be very aware and conscious, and I've studied, learn a lot. And so I'm like, I will be the flawless parent that perfectly shapes my children to be like perfect human beings. Nope, they are their own human beings, and they'll go through phases that terrify me. I'm like, oh my God, who is this person? Like, this is not, I'll see qualities of like selfishness or greed, or I'm like, what are you doing? And so those are like, those were scary moments. Now I've kind of seen the phases. Like I remember my daughter, she was probably 7, no, maybe 6. And she went through this phase of just being like, just really rude and like just mean and selfish. And I'm like, what's happening? And I'm like, my mind, I'm like, I've lost her. I'm losing her, and it lasted for like a month or something. And then she started being really sweet again. And I go, Sophie, can I just commend you? You're being so kind. And I go, like a few weeks ago, you went through that. You were being like really kind of mean. And I didn't know what was going on, but you weren't being how you had always been, that I knew you. And she goes, yeah, Dad. She goes, that I don't know what happened. She's like, but that Sophie is gone and she's never coming back. And so the important thing is to know that there are phases. But I will say one way it shows up is how I've heard my daughter talk about me. I'm really big on living by core values and guiding principles. And the way I differentiate those is a core value is something like unconditional love. A guiding principle, so a core value is usually 1 or 2 words, right? Acceptance, kindness, whatever. And then discipline. And then a guiding principle for me is translating that core value into an actionable commitment, right? So that I can live my core value. So I'll give you an example. One of my core values is unconditional acceptance, right? Which means accepting all things. Well, let me just say then the guiding principle is I will accept all things I cannot change unconditionally and be at peace with my life exactly as it is. Right. And those would be in my affirmation, those Powerful. Core values and guiding principles. So the guiding principles, how am I going to live this core value? Right. And so I try to really live in alignment with my core values and guiding principles in every area of my life, my morals, my diet, one of my values is to eat foods that add value to my physical well-being, right? So a guiding principle for that is I will always value I will always value the consequences of the foods I eat above the taste of the foods I eat, right? I think most of us choose foods based on, we look at a menu, what looks good, right? And it's like, usually it's not even a thought of like, what's the impact on my body by eating that thing. And so for me, it's like, what's the healthiest thing on the menu? What are the healthiest things? Okay, it's these three things. Of these three, which tastes the best for me, or which am I in the mood for, right? So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but my daughter in recent time, and I can't really think of how it has come up, but she's said things to me like, Dad, you're like the most positive person I know. Like, I never hear you complain or whatever. And I'm like, yes, like, okay, it's, you know, it's working. So even if she might not always exemplify that, right? I feel like if I keep being that for the next, 7 more years while she's at home, right, and just leading by example, I can only imagine, I sometimes will play in my head like a tape of her when she's, younger and be like, oh yeah, my dad always lived that way, right? Or, oh yeah, my dad always said that over and over and over. And when I fought him at the time, right? But now that I'm out on my own in the real world and I'm faced with this decision making, I can now always have those values that my dad instilled and that I saw him live as an anchor for me. And I think that's ultimately the best parenting strategy, is just being like Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world, be the version of your child that you hope they grow up to be.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point of thinking of, down the road, how's your daughter going to think back? Do you consciously or actively meditate or think on, what impact you're going to have on your kids, like how they're going to look back? So kind of that legacy type thinking, or is that just more of a consequence of just your everyday way of thinking?
Yeah, I don't really meditate on it, but I definitely think about it. And honestly, something I've struggled with is I've struggled with fear around messing my kids up more than I should. I read this book, Hold On to Your Kids. In fact, I think I'm only halfway through it. I set it down for a while. One of the best books I've ever read on parenting. And it's basically, the premise of this book is, hold on to your kids, is that your kids right now are being raised by, like, our culture has changed, and kids are being raised by their peers often more than adults, even also raised by media. You think about it, your kids are at school for most of the day, and then often, right, they come home, you eat dinner, you go to bed, right? But they spent, the majority of the day being influenced by people that weren't their parents, right?
Right.
Friends, teachers, and then if they come home and they play with kids, then on the weekends they're playing with their friends, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we implemented some rules. So that book, Hold On to Your Kids, is it talks about the dangers of what they call peer orientation, and then kind of solutions of how do you corral your kids back in and develop that bond so they want to spend more time with you and you're able to influence them. And one of our rules that we implemented is no friends during the week. And we live in the neighborhood with 3 other families with kids our kids' age. So that was, in the beginning, it was like, are you kidding me? But we were losing our kids to them, because every day they came home and they ran off. We never saw our kids.
Yeah.
So we have this rule, and now that it's been a few weeks or months, like they're fine, they get it. So there's no fight anymore, which is great. But anyway, the point is, I experienced a lot of fear, especially on that book. Like, I'm losing my kids to their friends, and even when I would see them exemplify those values I mentioned of, like, greed or whatever, I'd be like, oh my God, who are these kids becoming? So that's been a real struggle for me. And I've used affirmations. That's in my Miracle Morning. So I don't use meditation as much, but I do utilize affirmations. I have affirmations I have affirmations, one set just for my daughter, one set just for my son, and one set for me as a father for both of them. And one of the most important affirmations for me, as I kind of caught myself going, man, I live most of my life as a dad feeling inadequate and feeling like I'm failing. And I've heard a lot of parents, especially moms, they call it mom guilt or whatever, right? I've heard this is really common. But I realize when I objectively look at it, and if I ask anybody that knows me, including my kids, they'll be like, dude, you're like an amazing dad. You go over and above. But that wasn't my reality. That my subconscious was a fear-based, insecurity-based, failure-based consciousness. Once I became aware of that, one of my first affirmations around being a parent is what a phenomenal job I'm doing as a dad, and to really boost my confidence in that area and my emotional well-being in that area. And then I have, like, bullet points of, like, in case you're not, in case you need to be reminded, like, here's the things that you do over and above what, maybe most dads or you did before, And so, so I think that's really important, that as parents, you have to you've got to feel great as a parent. And I think that there's two parts to that. Number one is you've got to actually be the great parent, right? You
Sure.
can't lie to yourself and be like, well, I just want to feel good, so I'm a great parent, even though you're not. But I found that you can do the second part, which is your behavior can be objectively viewed as like, dude, you're a great parent, but you can still feel like a failure. And I think that it's equally important that both of those are on point.
Got it. Well, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And the aspect you mentioned of making sure that you're the person spending time with your kids and influencing them. I mean, in the personal development world, there's that Jim Rohn quote of you are the average of the 5 people you're closest to. And if you as a parent aren't one of those 5 people, then naturally they're going to be the average of, their 8-year-old friends or the teenage, Instagram or whichever social media platform that they're on, that they're following.
That's a great point, Brad. Yeah, really good point.
Yeah. So what impact have you seen as you implemented that no friends during the week and you've really made that conscious effort to be with your kids more during the week?
Yeah, we for sure have become closer. In fact, it's been quite a while now that I frequently will journal in my gratitude journal that my relationship with Sophie, with my daughter, is the best it's ever been. My relationship with my son is the best it's ever been. And that's been a consistent theme over the last, 6, 12 months, however long it's been that I've really been focusing on it. Not just the outer world, but the actual inner world as well, because I got cancer in fact, this is worth really mentioning. A little over 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a really rare aggressive form of cancer called acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And I was given a 10 to 30% chance of surviving. And as a parent, being told you have a 70 to 90% chance that you're going to die in the next few months is the hardest thing to deal with and to accept and manage that. And, the thought of like leaving your kids when they're young and them not having you as a dad, it just was really hard. And, but the wake up call for me when I got cancer was that I was unknowingly a workaholic, and anybody in my life could see it, by the way, wife included. I did not think I was. I was kind of the opposite, where instead of feeling like a failure back then, I was more of a failure, but I was actually like, no, dude, I spend time with them every day. I spend 10 minutes here and 15 minutes there. And I do this little thing and that little thing. And the rest of the time I'm working my butt off for the family. Leave me alone. Right. Like that. Right. And I think that's most entrepreneurs. If you said, hey, what's your number one priority in your life? And they'd go, a family, of course. And then you go, hey, show me your schedule real quick. Does it reflect that? And I think for most entrepreneurs, the answer is no, not really. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a stay-at-home parent, right? Like if you are the provider, great. But one of the most important lessons I ever learned, and it was around the time I got cancer, came from my friend John Vroman. Do you know John?
I know John, yeah.
Have you had him on the podcast yet?
Not yet. He'll be on here. He'll be making his rounds.
Yeah, let me know if you want an intro, I can text him, get him on.
Thank you.
But John's the founder of Front Row Dads, and which is an organization that I'm a part of. I'm a huge fan of. And what got John to found that is he was kind of at a career crossroads of like, what am I going to do next? And he asked himself, he went through his values. He's like, family's number one. How can I, and probably like you, Brad, right, doing this podcast, like, how can I align my number one value of family with my professional life so that there's not really any separation? And what he realized was, my kids, he said for years he had thought of himself as a provider, right? That's his role in the family. He's the provider, right? He's the breadwinner. And he realized that his kids are not going to remember how many mortgage payments he made, right? Or how many speeches he booked or how many books he sold. They're going to remember how much time they spent with him and the impact he made through the time he spent. That his number one role wasn't a provider. It was a father first and a provider second. And so for me, making that shift and realizing that all the same things, the kids, the impact I'm making is not the roof over the head. That is minimal. That yes, it's necessary, right? But that's not what's shaping my kids and the quality of their life in the future. And I think that I was addicted to success and achievement and, how can I reach more people and impact more people and all these things. And I realized I think I was valuing the global impact I made over the impact at home, because I was looking at numbers and quantity over quality. Like, no, I need to change millions of lives. And then it was like, nope, these 2 lives at home and my wife, the third, those 3 lives, and I had this paradigm shift that the impact I make for them is more important, infinitely more important than the impact I make for the millions of, the relatively shallow impact that I can make for the millions of people in the world pales in comparison. Going out there, sharing the miracle morning, like that pales in comparison to the impact that I'm making with these 3 individuals that I get to go deep with and shape who they are. So I don't know where I was going with that, but hopefully I got there.
No, you did for sure. And I think you touched on something that so many of us dads struggle with, and especially ambitious and driven dads, whether they're entrepreneurs or just guys who are trying to be the best in the world at their craft. And I talked recently to Kelly Starrett about this, and he was talking about how they're just work-life balance, that there's no such thing for him. It's just depends on which phase of your life. You're going to have to go hard in the paint and bust ass to be that successful, but you can't do it at the expense of your family, but you may have to do it at the expense of other areas within your life for a limited amount of time. So I love to get your perspective on just kind of how you think about that quote unquote work-life balance or integration, or if that's something that you have put much thought into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that work-life balance is a real thing. I also think intentional imbalance is a real thing, right? Yeah. That at times I
like that phrase.
I got that, I think, from John Berghoff, intentional imbalance. But the idea that there are, like I've had, when I was writing a book or a book launch, it required me to be like all in and work crazy hours and weekends sometimes. I think that the answer is in rituals and routines. I think that's it. I think that we have to be regimented and disciplined in our rituals and routines, and not just our, not just the morning ritual or whatever, but I'm talking about like, reading to your kids every night. In fact, I had a really profound shift a while back, real simple, but that I was going to wake my kids up every morning, and then I was going to put them to bed every night. And I know John Broman does the same thing. And it's funny, as I say that right now, I'm like, I've kind of fallen off that. My wife and I kind of take turns, and she'll read for a few months and then and actually what I do now on that piece, by the way, is I decided that the more we're together as a family, right, this whole divide and conquer, I was doing that a lot too, which it sometimes is okay. But I had a realization that, we hear it, but you don't get it until your kids, all of a sudden you start to see, whoa, shit, they're a teenager. Like, wait, they're not. What happened to my, and you go back and you watch videos of when they were 3 and 4 and you're like, oh my God, that I'm never getting that back. And you just, you start to realize they're past the halfway point. Once they turn 9 and you're like, okay, wait a minute. Now it's the countdown kind of thing. And for me, like now with reading, when my wife reads, if she's reading at night, I'm sitting next to her and I'm rubbing the kids back while my wife reads. You know what I mean? Yeah. So now it's like family time. And so for me, it was realizing, and then now I take the kids to school on Tuesday and Thursday, and I pick them up Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I've tried to get as close to 50-50 parenting as I possibly can. And I will promise you, entrepreneur friends, you're never going to regret that. You're never going to, you're not going to go, man, I spent too much damn time with my kids from 0 to 18. But I can tell you, I already regret that I didn't do more of this when they were younger. I coulda, shoulda, woulda. And so now, like I said, I think that the solution is having rituals and routines that ensure that you spend significant quality time with your kids. And for me, for example, Saturdays and Sunday, family day, all day, both days. Morning time from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., getting the kids ready with my wife. We used to divide and conquer. I used to go and do a miracle morning, straight into work, right? And I would just kiss the kids goodbye. That's ridiculous, right? Like that morning time. And so now at 7 a.m., go wake the kids up, and then we make lunches together. Like, we do all the things together. Could I be in my office? Sure. Could I justify that? Sure. But will I ever get that time back? Absolutely not. So 7 to 8 a.m. is family time in the morning, just getting ready together. And then we head to, I take them to the school, like I said, pick them up 3 days a week. And, so yeah, those rituals and routines, and then things like family board meetings and, are just absolutely crucial. And then the other thing that I'll share, you mentioned legacy and thinking about that. I think about what they're going to remember are the rituals and the routines. And so one thing I started doing, and it's simple, but I make homemade blueberry waffles every Saturday morning.
Awesome.
Right. And so like a little thing like that, but they call for it, and it's so funny. It makes me smile when my daughter this last weekend had a friend over, and she's like, oh my God, my dad makes the best blueberry waffles. Wait till you try these. And I'm like, Yeah. So yeah, I think that rituals and routines is the solution to ensuring that. And that way, if somebody says, what's number one priority? You say family. They say, show me your schedule. They're like, damn.
It's built in.
You're really living that. Look at that, 7 to 8 a.m. family, right? Like, 4 or 5 to, family, like you're spending 5 hours a day with your family, like, and all weekend. Like, that's incredible,
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to those kind of habits that it's hard. It might be harder in the beginning, but once that's just built into your life, it's just automatic. So I love that. You said one other thing that kind of blew part of my mind, which is, it makes sense, but you don't really think about it. The fact that at age 9, that's kind of halftime for when their time of living with you at home. I think I read that once your kids move out at 18, after 18, you spend 80 or 90% of the time that you're going to spend with them before that. So the fact that age 9 is like that halfway point, like I never thought of it in that terms, is just another trigger for me of like, wow, that time is so short. Like that 18 years really is so short when you boil it down and break it down and think about it.
Yeah. And the other point about that is those first 9 years, dude, they're your babies. Right. And then as they start, think about it, the way, and I guess everyone's different, but like, it's just the way you interact with a 3-year-old and the way you interact with a 13-year-old are radically different.
Right.
And I've found that, for me, I'm always present to the perfection of the moment and the time now. So I don't live in the and there are times where I see those videos of them at 3 and I'm like, oh my God, they were so cute. Yeah. I missed that. But I try to be really present to and really foster the relationship. So my daughter and I, we have this killer relationship at 11. But I would imagine when she's 16, 17, right? I can only imagine that you're going to see them less. I would imagine, right? They're going to be doing all these activities and things. So that first half is much more, you're with them, you're engaged. They want to play with, right? I mean, I don't know about you, when I was 15, I wasn't like, I want to play with you, daddy. That's my top priority. I was like, dude, I want to go play with my friends, right?
Yeah, right.
So it is interesting, right? It's like the front ending that kind of, really intimate time. And I don't know, like I said, I'm really working. My daughter's 11. It was a wake up call though. Probably about a year ago, I journaled about this, maybe a year or two. I go, hey, I got big plans for us today. We're going to have this awesome day. I thought we could do this and this, all your favorite things. And she's like, oh, I was really hoping I could play with Bella today. And I'm like, I journaled it. I'm like, wow, this was a wake up call. My daughter's 9 and already I threw out all her favorite activities and she'd rather play with a friend. I'm like, man, what is happening? So.
Right. So one question I love to ask is kind of the time machine question of if you could go back in time and give yourself, a piece of advice or wisdom, but just a little spin on it on the fatherhood topic is if you could go back and talk to yourself 11 years ago, right when your daughter was born, is there something that you've picked up, and we may have touched on in this conversation already, but that you would really want to instill in that brand new dad version of Hal?
Yeah, I think that, obviously everything I've shared so far for sure. But I think that one thing I wish I would have done, and damn it, this should be the catalyst for me to start it now because it's never too late.
That's what this conversation is actually for. I'm trying to incept whatever this is.
Thank you. Some sort, going back to rituals and routines, some sort of ritual or routine around, journaling, or maybe even selfie videos, like video journaling,
Yeah.
for each of my kids. Right. And when I had cancer, that was when that was like, I was like, man, I never, like, they don't, if I go, what do they have where they would have me, and I like the idea of video blogs, or right. Just so even if it's, if it's, hey, today we did, like, at the end of the day, like a summary of what you guys did that day or what you love about them, or it can be different format every day. But yeah, that's the advice I'm giving to the dad, when I was first starting out, and the dad that I am now, because I still have not done that yet.
Yeah. What's the saying? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So
Yeah,
let's do it.
100%.
Hal, I know we're running up on time here. So is there anywhere you would like to point people? I know you've got awesome resources in your Miracle Morning book, Miracle for Families, the Miracle Equation, which we didn't even touch on today, which is another one that changed my life. You've got a movie coming out. Where can people find out some more about you?
Yeah, the best place, thank you for that. The best place for all of those is miraclemorning.com. That's the hub. You'll see, you can access the books there. Probably one of the coolest things, join the Miracle Morning community. Right now, it's a Facebook group with 275,000 people from 100 countries.
Wow.
That wake up every day and fulfill their own potential and then support each other and doing the same. It's one of the most loving, non-judgmental supportive groups I've ever seen. And then, the most exciting thing for me professionally in terms of my mission right now is the Miracle Morning movie comes out on 12/12/2020. Tickets as of today are not for sale yet, hopefully in about a week. But if you go to miraclemorning.com and just get on the email list, as soon as the world premiere tickets go on sale, we're going to do a really cool live experience on 12/12/2020 where it's going to be the movie world premiere, a live training from me, a live Q&A, all sorts of cool stuff. But miraclemorning.com is a great place to get plugged into all that.
That's awesome. And I love that you're just spreading positivity. And like you said, your community, it seems like these days, one of the rare places on the internet where it's just filled with love and support. And it really, truly is. And especially with that volume of people. So I appreciate everything that you're doing. Thanks for coming on and sharing a bit about this other side of the coin on the fatherhood stuff. It's awesome to learn from you and just hear what your journey's been. So appreciate you, Hal.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you too, man. Keep doing this good work.